The priority's back on the agenda. Again, that's usually the first clue. Not the only clue, but it's a good one. Same priority, different meeting, different language, different owner maybe, different dashboard, different update format, but somehow the work still isn't moving the way everyone expected. Maybe it's a customer onboarding. Maybe it's a new market push. Maybe it's pricing. Maybe it's hiring. Maybe it's the same operational improvement that's now appeared in 3 quarterly plans in a row. Everyone agrees it matters. No one is saying it's unimportant. No one's trying to sabotage it. No one's sitting in the meeting saying, actually, I'd prefer if this stayed stuck. And yet it keeps coming back. The team reviews it. People explain the latest version of the problem. Someone says, we need better alignment. Someone else says, we need clearer ownership. Someone else says, we need to make a decision. Someone else says, we just need people to execute. And all of those things might be partly true. That's what makes this so hard. A stuck priority can look like one problem from the outside, but underneath, it can have very different causes. And if you misread the cause, you usually apply the wrong fix. You add another meeting when the issue is decision ownership. You ask for alignment when the issue is authority. You push harder on execution when the real problem is that nobody's named the trade-off. You tell the operator to drive it harder when the structure around them is actually making the work impossible to close. That's the piece I want to sit with today. Not all drag is the same drag. Welcome back to the Hidden Drag Brief. My name is Wojnowski, and today I want to talk about the 4 types of hidden drag: decision drag, alignment drag, structural drag, and human drag. But I don't want to turn this into a glossary. That wouldn't be very useful, and frankly, it would be very boring. And honestly, I don't think that's how these patterns show up in real companies. Nobody walks out of a leadership meeting saying, ah yes, what we have here is a mixed drag pattern with structural and human components. At least I hope not. What actually happens is much more ordinary. One priority just keeps returning. People are tired of talking about it. The team has already spent too much time on it. Everyone can describe the symptoms, but the underlying cause is still blurry. So I want to use one recurring priority as the example, and I'll look at it in 4 different ways. Same priority, 4 different reads, because that's where the usefulness is. Not in knowing the names, but in being able to ask, what kind of drag is sitting underneath this? Let's use customer onboarding. Simple enough to picture, a founder-led company has grown quickly. Sales is bringing in larger customers. The product's getting more complex. Customer success is stretched. Implementation timelines are slipping. The founder is still getting pulled into customer escalations. The operator's been trying to tighten the handoff between sales, product, and customer success. Everyone agrees onboarding needs to improve. It's been named as a priority more than once. It was in the quarterly plan. It showed up in the leadership meeting. It was part of the operating review. There's probably a spreadsheet somewhere with an owner, a due date, and a status color. And yet, 3 months later, the same issue is back. Customers are still waiting too long. Sales still thinks customer success is too slow. Customer success still thinks sales is overpromising. Product thinks every onboarding issue turns into a customization request. Finance is starting to worry about margin. And the founder's frustrated because this was supposed to be fixed already. And the operator is quietly holding the whole thing together with check-ins, translation, and follow-up conversations. So that's the scene. Now, a lot of teams would treat that as one stuck priority. Onboarding is stuck. But that's not enough. The more useful question is, what kind of drag is keeping it stuck? Because the answer changes what you do next. Let's start with decision drag. Decision drag shows up when the team hasn't actually closed the core decision underneath the priority. The work might have an owner, the priority might be named, the timeline might be visible, but the real decision is still open. In the onboarding example, the team says, we need to fix onboarding. That sounds clear, but what decision are they actually trying to close? Are they deciding to make onboarding faster? Are they deciding to make onboarding more standardized? Are they deciding to stop accepting customers who need too much customization? Are they deciding to add implementation capacity? Are they deciding to change what sales is allowed to promise? Are they deciding to delay new feature work so product can improve onboarding tooling? Those aren't the same decision. They may all live near the same priority, but they're all very different calls. And this is where decision drag begins. The team agrees on the general direction, but the core call stays vague. So the work keeps moving, but it moves around the decision instead of through it. Sales keeps selling, customer success keeps absorbing, product keeps negotiating exceptions, the founder keeps stepping in when a large customer gets noisy, the operator keeps trying to make it all coherent, but nobody has closed the real call. For example, from now on, we'll only onboard this customer segment through the standard path unless the deal meets this threshold. That's a decision. Or, we're accepting slower onboarding for the next 60 days because we're prioritizing larger customers, but we're not adding customization. That's a decision. Or, we're pausing 2 internal product improvements so product can build the onboarding tooling required to reduce implementation load. That's a decision. Those calls have trade-offs inside them. That's why they're uncomfortable. Decision drag often hides behind a nice priority label. Improve onboarding. Increase retention. Fix the handoff. Accelerate enterprise sales. Improve delivery quality. Those are all useful directions, but they're not always decisions. And when the decision underneath them stays open, the priority keeps coming back, often in a different form. And this is where that phrase, decision echo, can be helpful. A recurring priority is often a decision echo. The same open decision is coming back through different symptoms. First, it looks like a sales handoff issue. Then it looks like a customer success capacity issue. Then it looks like a product roadmap issue. Then it looks like founder escalation. But underneath, it may be the same decision that never fully closed. What kind of customer are we actually trying to serve right now? What promises are we no longer willing to make? What work are we willing to slow down so onboarding can improve? Who owns the call when a customer asks for an exception? Those are decision questions. If they're unanswered, the drag isn't mainly a motivation problem. It's decision drag. And the next useful question is, what decision is this priority still asking us to close? Not who needs to work harder, not how do we get more aligned, not yet. First ask, what call is still open? That's decision drag. Now let's look at the same priority through the lens of alignment drag. Alignment drag is different. Here the team may have made a decision, or at least they may have made something close to a decision, but people are carrying different interpretations of what it means. This is very common in founder-led companies because people can agree on the same sentence and still mean very different things by it. We need to improve onboarding. Everyone nods. Sales hears, we need customer success to move faster after the deal closes. Customer success hears, sales needs to stop selling messy deals. Product hears, we need fewer special requests. Finance hears, we need to protect margin. The founder hears, we need customers to feel taken care of. The operator hears, I'm going to have to reconcile all of this. Same sentence, different meaning. That's alignment drag. It isn't always disagreement, and that's the tricky part. Sometimes the room seems aligned because everyone agrees with the words, but the words are doing too much work. Improve onboarding, better customer experience, cleaner handoff, more scalable process, higher quality delivery. Those are phrases people can agree with while still picturing completely different realities. So the priority comes back because the team was never aligned on the meaning of the work. This is why I pay close attention to what's happening after the meeting. If people leave the room and start making different, smaller decisions, that tells you something. Sales updates messaging in a way customer success didn't expect. Customer success builds a checklist that sales thinks slows down the deal. Product deprioritizes tooling because they thought the issue was process. The founder approves an exception because they thought the new rules still allowed judgment calls. Nobody's necessarily wrong. They're operating from different interpretations. Alignment drag often sounds like, "I thought we meant this." That's not how I understand it. We agreed on the direction, but not the details. I didn't realize that applied to this customer type. I thought we were still making exceptions for strategic accounts. Notice what's happening. The issue isn't that no one cares. The issue is that the team never reached a shared interpretation strong enough to guide behavior under pressure. And that phrase matters. Under pressure. Alignment is easy when the conversation is calm. It gets tested when a customer pushes, when revenue is on the line, when a founder has a strong reaction, when one team has to give something up, when the operator isn't in the room to translate. If the shared interpretation breaks at that moment, the priority wasn't as aligned as it looked. So with alignment drag, the useful question isn't only, what did we decide? It's, what did each person think the decision meant? And maybe even more directly, what would we now say yes to, say no to, slow down, stop, or escalate because of this decision? If 5 people answer that 5 different ways, the drag isn't just decision drag, it's alignment drag. The decision may exist, but the interpretation doesn't travel cleanly. Now let's look at the same onboarding priority through structural drag. Structural drag shows up when the system around the priority doesn't support the decision the company says it wants. This is where leaders can get very frustrated because they think the priority is clear. They think the team is aligned, they think the owner is named, and still the work doesn't move. The reason may be structural. In our onboarding example, maybe the operator owns the onboarding improvement priority, but sales compensation still rewards closing deals that create onboarding complexity. Customer success is accountable for onboarding speed, but can't say no to bad fit customers. Product is expected to support onboarding improvements, but its roadmap is still measured against feature commitments. The founder says they want standardized onboarding, but still personally approves exceptions for large accounts. The leadership team says the priority matters, but no capacity has moved. So the operator owns the work, but not the conditions required to close it. That's structural drag. This one can be easy to mistake for execution weakness, because on paper, the work looks assigned. There's an owner, there are meetings, there are status updates, there are project tasks, but the structure around the work keeps pulling against the priority. The owner has responsibility without enough authority. The team has a goal without the capacity to meet it. The process has steps, but no real decision rights. The handoff has documentation, but no rule for what happens when sales sells outside the standard path. The meeting has updates, but not the right people to close the trade-offs. That's why structural drag can feel so maddening. People are busy, people are trying, but the system keeps making the stuck priority normal. You can see this when the same workaround keeps reappearing. The operator has to get involved in every exception. The founder has to approve customer-specific promises. Customer success has to negotiate every messy handoff. Product has to decide case by case what counts as a real need versus a one-off request. Finance keeps raising margin concerns after the deal is already sold. The structure is teaching the team how to repeat the problem. That's different from decision drag. With decision drag, the call isn't closed. With structural drag, the call may be closed, but the system can't carry it. The most useful question here is, what would have to be structurally true for this priority to move without heroics? That's a good question to ask slowly. What authority would the owner need? What capacity would have to move? What metric would have to change? What exception rule would have to exist? What meeting would need the power to close the trade-off? What promise would sales no longer be allowed to make? What founder behavior would need to change for the structure to be real? Structural drag often reveals a gap between declared ownership and operating reality. The slide says one thing, the system says something else, and people follow the system. They always do. Now let's look at human drag. This one needs some care because I don't mean this in a soft or vague way. It's not about turning an operating problem into therapy. Human drag shows up when people can see the hard call, but the personal or relational cost of naming it feels too high. In the onboarding example, the hard sentence might be, "We're selling customers we're not currently built to onboard well." Or, "The founder is still approving exceptions that make the standard process impossible." Or, "Customer success is being asked to absorb promises they had no role in making." Or, "Product doesn't believe this priority matters as much as the leadership team says it does." Or, "We can't improve onboarding and keep accepting every customer request." Those sentences change the room, not because they're dramatic, but because they assign cost. They make the trade-off visible. They may disappoint someone. They may challenge the founder. They may create tension between sales and customer success. They may force the operator to say what everyone has been working around. So instead, the team talks around it. They talk about process. They talk about communication. They talk about better handoffs. They talk about more visibility. They talk about clearer roles. And sometimes those things really do matter, but sometimes they're safer substitutes for the real hard sentence. That's human drag. The decision is visible, but ownership has a cost. So the organization finds ways to stay near the decision without fully stepping into it. This is one reason recurring priorities can become strangely exhausting. Not because the work is always complex. Sometimes the exhausting part is that everyone knows the conversation they're not having. The operator knows it, the founder may know it, the team may know it, but the room keeps choosing a safer version of the issue. And then everyone wonders why the priority still has no movement. Human drag often sounds polite. That's what makes it so hard to catch. We probably need to revisit the process. We may need better cross-functional communication. We should tighten the criteria. We need more clarity. Those sentences might be true, but sometimes they're not the sentence. The sentence might be, "We need to stop selling this version of the deal." Or, "We need the founder to stop making exceptions unless the whole system is willing to absorb them." Or, "We need to choose between customer intimacy and scalable onboarding for this segment." Or, "We don't have the capacity to do both." Those are harder. They're also often where closure starts. So the useful question for human drag is, what are we not saying because it would make this decision harder to own? And that question won't be comfortable. It shouldn't be used as a weapon. It shouldn't be tossed into a room to sound brave. But asked honestly, it can reveal the thing the priority has been orbiting. So now we've looked at the same recurring priority 4 different ways. Customer onboarding is stuck. If it's decision drag, the core call hasn't closed. What kind of customer will we serve right now? What promises are allowed? What trade-off are we accepting? If it's alignment drag, people are using the same words but carrying different meanings. What does improve onboarding actually mean to sales, product, customer success, finance, the founder, and the operator? If it's structural drag, the system doesn't support the decision. Who has the authority? What capacity moved? What metrics changed? What rules make the new behavior possible? If it's human drag, people can see the hard call, but the cost of naming it is too high. What sentence would change the room if someone finally said it plainly? Same priority, 4 different causes, and this is why not all drag is the same drag. That line's worth keeping close, because the wrong diagnosis creates more drag. If the issue is decision drag and you solve it with more alignment meetings, people may talk more, but the call still won't close. If the issue is alignment drag and you solve it by naming an owner, the owner may inherit 5 different interpretations of the work. If the issue is structural drag and you solve it with motivation, you may make people feel blamed for a system that keeps pulling against them. If the issue is human drag and you solve it with process, you may create a cleaner way to avoid the sentence nobody wants to say. That's why the first move isn't always to push harder. Sometimes the first move is to read the drag correctly. When a priority keeps returning, pause before asking, "Why isn't this done?" That question has its place, but it can be too narrow. A better first question might be, what kind of drag is this? Is there a decision we still haven't closed? Is there an interpretation we don't share? Is there a structure that can't carry the decision? Is there a hard sentence we're avoiding? Those 4 questions can change the conversation quickly because they move the room away from vague frustration. They give the team a more precise way to look at the stuck priority. And precision matters here. A founder might see the onboarding issue and think the team needs to execute. The operator might see it and think, we don't have the authority path to make this stick. Sales might think, customer success is slowing things down. Customer success might think, sales is creating work the system can't absorb. Product might think, we're letting every exception become our problem. All of those perspectives may contain truth, but until the team identifies the type of drag, the conversation keeps cycling. That's how a recurring priority becomes a decision echo. The same open issue comes back again and again, not always wearing the same label. Sometimes it comes back as a customer escalation, sometimes as a capacity issue, sometimes as a roadmap debate, sometimes as founder frustration, sometimes as operator overload, sometimes as team hesitation. But the open issue underneath hasn't closed, so the system keeps finding new ways to bring it back. Now, I want to add one important point. Most stuck priorities aren't pure. They're usually mixed, and that's normal. You may have decision drag and structural drag together. The team hasn't closed the trade-off and the owner doesn't have authority. You may have alignment drag and human drag together. People are using the same words and nobody wants to say that the founder is still changing the decision through exceptions. You may have all 4. That doesn't mean the framework failed, it means the work is real. The goal isn't to put the priority into a neat box. The goal is to find the most useful starting point. What's the drag that, if named, would make the next conversation more honest? For one team, that might be we haven't decided whether standardization matters more than short-term revenue. For another, it might be we keep saying onboarding, but each function means something different. For another, it might be we named an owner, but we didn't give them authority over the promises that create the problem. For another, it might be we all know sales is overpromising, but nobody wants to own the conflict. Different starting points, same recurring priority. That's the value of the 4 types. They give you a way to stop treating every stuck priority as an execution issue. Some are execution issues. Of course they are. Sometimes people do need to follow through. Sometimes the work is just behind. Sometimes the plan was too optimistic. But in founder-led teams, especially as the company gets more complex, a lot of execution problems are downstream of drag that was never named. Priority doesn't keep returning because people forgot it mattered. It keeps returning because something underneath it hasn't been closed, shared, supported, or said. That's a very different diagnosis, and it creates a very different kind of leadership conversation. Instead of, why are we still talking about onboarding? You might ask, what decision is onboarding still asking us to make? Instead of, why aren't people aligned? You might ask, what does each team think this priority actually means? Instead of, why isn't the owner driving this? You might ask, what authority or capacity does the owner still not have? Instead of, why won't anybody just say it? You might ask, what sentence are we avoiding because it would make the trade-off real? Those questions are practical. They're not big theory. You can use them in a leadership meeting. You can use them in a founder-operator conversation. You can use them before adding another recurring meeting. You can use them when a priority shows up in the quarterly plan for the 3rd time and everyone feels the quiet frustration in the room. And I'd especially use them when the operator is carrying too much of the interpretation. That's often where the drag becomes visible first. The operator has to translate what was decided. The operator has to calm down the founder. The operator has to help sales understand the boundary. The operator has to help customer success absorb the exception. The operator has to keep product from being pulled into every custom request. The operator has to make the priority look more closed than it really is. And trust me, that's just not sustainable. And it's not fair to call that execution when the operator is actually carrying unresolved drag. So here's the practical move I'd leave you with. Pick one priority that keeps coming back, not 5, 1. Maybe it's onboarding, maybe it's hiring, maybe it's pricing, maybe it's your enterprise segment, maybe it's the internal operating rhythm, maybe it's a product decision that keeps circling. Then ask 4 questions. First, what decision is still open underneath this priority? Second, where are people using the same words but meaning different things? Third, what structure is missing, misaligned, or too weak to carry the decision? Fourth, what are we not saying because it would make the decision harder to own? And don't rush those questions. Don't try to make the answers sound polished. The first honest answer is usually more useful than the clean one. You might discover the priority is stuck because no one has chosen the trade-off. You might discover everyone means something different by the same goal. You might discover the owner has responsibility without authority. You might discover the room has been avoiding one sentence for months. And any one of those discoveries is useful, because once you can name the kind of drag, the next step becomes much more clear. Decision drag needs a decision. Alignment drag needs shared interpretation. Structural drag needs authority, capacity, rules, or operating design. Human drag needs the hard sentence to be named without blame. Not all drag is the same drag, and a recurring priority usually doesn't need more generic pressure. It just needs a better read. If this sounds familiar, don't start by trying to diagnose the whole company. Start with one priority that keeps coming back. The hidden drag diagnostic helps you see whether the drag underneath it is decision drag, alignment drag, structural drag, human drag, or some combination thereof. It takes about 7 to 10 minutes. The link is in the show notes. Use it on one real priority, not a theoretical one. The priority that keeps returning to the meeting, the Slack thread, the founder conversation, or the operator's lab. Because once you know what kind of drag is sitting underneath it, you can stop treating every symptom as a separate problem. You can start closing the thing that keeps bringing the priority back. My name is Wojnowski. Thanks for listening to the Hidden Drag Brief. I'll see you next time.